Minimum wage has become a very divisive subject or topic here in the United States, with Republicans disagreeing with Democrats. And of course, we have a number of people in the fast food industry that are working full-time jobs, but unfortunately they can't make ends meet. They have to rely on government assistance just to feed their families. Same thing with the retail industry. Just to give you a quick stat, 50% of people working in the fast food industry rely on government assistance. So obviously they're not being paid a living wage, and that's a bit of a problem. But it turns out that the way we handle that issue here is very different from how they're handling it in Great Britain. In fact, recently, a conservative chancellor by the name of George Osborne said that he would be supportive of increasing minimum wage. Take a look.
An above-inflation rise in the minimum wage could be on the cards tonight, as the Chancellor said that the country could afford it. George Osborne said he was ready to consider putting up the hourly rate to £7, saying he wanted to restore its real value for people, the low-pay commission.
Well, just as we were all in this together in the crisis, I want to make sure we're all in this together in the recovery. And because we're fixing the economy, because we're working through our plan, I believe Britain can afford an above-inflation increase in the minimum wage, so we restore its real value for people, and we make sure we have a recovery for all, and that work always pays.
Wow, an above inflation minimum wage hike, which is so impressive. And I should note that, conservatives in Britain are different from conservatives here in the United States. I have a friend named Shivala Medlena, who's a journalist there, and she spoke to me a little bit about how the conservatives in Britain are almost like the moderate Democrats here, or moderate liberals here in the United States. So there is a little bit of a difference. But I should also note that during the State of the Union address, President Obama did say that he will sign an executive order increasing the wage of new federal workers from $7.25 to $10.10. And that was largely meant to be symbolic. It's not really going to impact a huge population of people, but we'll see if Congress follows suit and actually passes some sort of living wage. Now, Max, first question goes to you. Why do you think there's a little bit of a discrepancy between the United States and Britain?
Well, I think it's exactly like you said. I think that conservatives in Britain, comparing them to conservatives here, it's like almost apples and oranges. They're socially liberal, but I say bravo to them. I think that minimum wage is like, we were talking about McDonald's and how they pay their workers so little. They actually have posters in like the employee rooms of how to be less hungry from working there, which is like insane. It's like break your food into little pieces, you'll go hungry less, or something like that. Which is like,
that true?
They do. Yeah, you can Google that. It's like
during Christmas, Walmart.
The can drive.
Yes, there was a local Walmart. I forget which
Ohio.
state it was in. It was in Ohio. Thank you. They had a sign asking its customers to donate food to its employees. That's absurd. Obviously, you guys aren't paying your employees enough. And by the way, that's costing us, U.S. taxpayers, money, right? Because we have to pay into these government programs that, subsidize these companies and help to keep their employees alive.
I think the first thing to understand is that the UK is very different than the United States. I actually lived in England for a little while, and they don't have as much income inequality as we have, first of all. Obviously, when we think of England, we associate it with maybe the monarch and seeing all these blue bloods and people with a ton of money, and there is an elite class, but then the middle class tends to be a bit more diverse and a bit bulkier. They also don't have money in politics in the same way we do. Now, clearly there's, people contribute, and there's obviously always going to be people that have money are going to have power and influence, but it's not run the way our country is 100% run on just which corporations can purchase different politicians in order to push their legislation through. So that's why you're going to see something like a minimum wage be raised even by the conservatives in England, because the conservatives aren't being paid by the larger conversations in order to drive that minimum wage down. The other thing is minimum wage in this country is understanding what it means. Like you were saying, when Barack Obama says, I want to raise the minimum wage, he only has the power to raise the federal minimum wage, which only affects, as you said, federal employees or people working in a federal building. So unless that McDonald's is inside the Pentagon, people at McDonald's don't benefit from this. So this is a whole bunch of lip service to make people and to make Obama's followers feel like he's doing something great for the people that have less money and the less fortunate, when he isn't. He's not enacting anything that helps anyone really in any meaningful way.
Mariana, do you think that there's any hope that Congress will work together, that Democrats and Republicans will somehow work together and do their job in representing the American people?
Hope springs eternal. Do I think it's going to happen? Yeah, you know what? I do, actually. I think that with the groundswell of the population my God, especially people of color, they're the ones who are really, really carrying the burden of this. I was looking at a statistic of this. What was it? 42% of minimum wage earners are people of color, but they only make up 32% of the total workforce. That's extraordinary to me. I think it's unconscionable that we can't help people, the workforce of this country, get themselves in some ways get themselves off that debt treadmill and to be able to rise up into a more strong middle class. When I was at home doing research for this particular segment, I found this sentence that was astounding to me, and I think it's so interesting. It was prior to the 20th century. You probably know this because you have an MBA, and that was so beautifully said. The points you made. Very salient. Prior to the 20th century, economics was considered a moral science. Isn't that extraordinary? A moral science. Where did that go?
But economics, a lot of it was based on how to help populations, how to track and to shift where the money goes in order to distribute it, which is such a negative thing. When people hear distribute the wealth now, they think, oh my God, the president's going in there like Robin Hood and stealing money from people. But economics was to track and help distribute, whether it was wealth or anything else like that initially. And we didn't even, I'll say one thing for the minimum wage in this country. That's not an old thing. The minimum wage has not existed since the beginning. FDR is the one who passed the minimum wage. And in fact, the minimum wage at first was struck down by the Supreme Court. They said it was unconstitutional, and the only reason the minimum wage even exists is because FDR strong-armed the Supreme Court into passing the legislation and setting a minimum wage. So I don't know if minimum wage in this country is necessarily the solution to our problems. And when you asked before, when are the Democrats and the Republicans going to work together? They are working together. The Republicans and the Democrats are almost the exact same thing in this country, and when it comes to Washington, they are working together entirely just to keep having the politicians and everyone else pad their pockets and make more and more money, and to keep us, the voters, fighting each other as if it's the red team and the blue team at field day in high school or something.
It's like the Hunger Games.
Exactly, it really is, and it's really, we're all scrambling to go, oh my gosh, should we raise the minimum wage, and what do we do about these rights, and red team, my team wins, and I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, when really all the people in Washington are essentially doing the same thing and essentially benefiting the same way, and we're paying for it by scrambling around like lunatics arguing for our side, rather than going, everybody in Washington is not doing anything for my benefit, or the majority of people there, so let's actually attack these issues and change things rather than just arguing over our piddly little opinions.
Yes. Now, income inequality is, I know. Go, girl. Very well said. Income inequality continues to be a really big issue. And if you want a thriving economy, it's important to empower the middle class. But unfortunately, that's not what we're doing right now. We're taking the power out of the middle class, which means that, look, who's going to buy the products that these corporations are putting out there? If you can't put food on your table for your children, you're not going to go out there and you're not going to stimulate the economy with your money. You barely have any. So we'll see how Congress works this out or doesn't work this out, and we'll keep you guys posted on the minimum wage story. But it is symbolic that Obama did do what he did during the State of the Union, and maybe it'll influence some people to think clearly.